Hello and welcome. This is Beriathan of the Citadel Guard of Gondor, and today I bring you an update on what's new for Update 35 Beta 3. And this round of beta introduces a lot of changes and updates to the things we have seen on Beta 1 and Beta 2. So we'll be revisiting some of the things I covered earlier on those two videos to let you know exactly what has changed. And here we are back on the forum post for the Warden changes and feedback, and you can see here the updates for Beta 3 are in pink so that we can easily track them all. First of all, we have Gambit Chains are now a sequence of 4 gambits. Any gambit other than a potency gambit will count, and neither the gambit's type nor length matters. This is a change that was already introduced on Beta 2. But it wasn't properly signaled back then, so that's why they are taking the time to put it in pink now. However, what we have here is Gambit Chains are now unlocked automatically at level 30, at which point you will also earn the Way of the Spear, which allows you to catch out advanced technique earned from completing chains. So there are some minor changes to the leveling scheme of the Warden for this round of beta, and we'll get to the Gambit Chains and the Way of the Spear in just a minute, because before you reach level 30 there are, as I said, some really minor changes. So for example, now you can get Offensive Strike at level 2, and on Beta 1 you got it at level 3. And something that we'll also get to later is the fact that you now get all your Masteries at level 39, up from level 24. That was the case on the last round of beta. And the Way of the Spear, which once again is something that is now granted automatically at level 30. Also at level 30, alongside the different gambits that we have seen on the first video, you got here the new things. Well, you have the passive skill Gambit Chains and the passive skill Master Sword Training, which is a little bit unrelated, but let me explain. Gambit Chains. So now you get a proper indication if you're getting Gambit Chains. Sequences of gambits will build and complete chains empowering some of your skills, and that will also give you the skill for the Way of the Spear. And this solves an issue that I had on the first round of beta, in the way in which Gambit Chains and advanced techniques were just unlocked, but you didn't get any indication of when and how they worked. And I mean, for veteran wardens and people that followed all this beta process, that's all good, nothing in there. But new players coming after the update might get a little lost about it, and that was my gripe on Beta 1. But now that the game introduces you to the concept of Gambit Chains and gives you your base skill to consume your advanced techniques alongside it, that is, in my opinion, a nice introduction to the concept of Gambit Chains and advanced techniques, and that comes now at level 30, and that is also great. But also here in the passive skills, we have a Master Spear Training that you will see now grants a plus 7% spear damage. And this, according to On Magma Hall, is with the intention of bringing the spear damage to the same levels as the sword damage and the club damage bonus that you get from racial traits. So now if you want to run your Warden using spears, which for a lot of people it fulfills the fantasy of the class and it's what the class it's supposed to be, now you are not hampered in your DPS output, because now the passive skill is making up for the difference that you would get from the racial traits. So using here that Master Sword Training and Master Club Training only give you 2% bonus, but you can get that up to the plus 7% if you are equipping your racial traits. And now the Spear Training will take you to the same level. So it seems, but this is just speculation on my part, it seems we are back to the days in which Wardens were using a spear for their DPS builds and a sword for their tanking builds. At least that's how I ran for many years. And in fact, I still kept some of my spears during a long time, but after a while I just had to admit there was really no point on keeping a spear, and I just switched to the sword. It seems now, however, that I can switch back to the spear, and that also makes it easier for you to know what item you have equipped depending on the build you are running. Before, you had to hover over your weapon, make sure that was the right weapon, but by looking at the traceries. But now that you have the visual indication between spear and sword, that will also make all the build swapping way more convenient than it is now. And at level 39, you will get access to your masteries. And why this change? We have no official confirmation, but why are you getting your masteries now at level 39 instead of level 24? Well, my theory is that since Gambit Chains and advanced techniques are introduced at level 30, McMahon didn't want to overwhelm new wardens by giving you your masteries and shortly after introducing you to the new mechanic of the class with advanced techniques. So instead, he decided to save masteries for later, and that way players could focus first on learning Gambit Chains and advanced techniques, and when you have mastered that, the class introduces you to the masteries, which will speed up the process of building Gambit Chains and thus cashing out advanced techniques. And I do like this change for the reasons I already stated, but also this is just nostalgia, but this also takes me back to the early Warden days before the revamps on Helm's Deep. Back in the day, you got your masteries at level 50, we're not quite there yet, and I don't think we need to be. I think level 39 is a good middle ground in between what we had before and what we had before on beta as well. But getting the masteries at level 39 also makes you feel like you earned them in a way, you know, like you've been playing the class from level 1 to 38 in a way, learning you to build the gambits, and then it's a way for the game saying you earned this and now you are ready for a new way of playing the Warden. So I really like this change as well. And this covers all differences in the leveling process from beta 1 to beta 3. After level 39, everything goes the way in which we saw for beta 1, so there's nothing else to mention in this regard. However, you still need to go back to your trainer and get all the gambits and skills that you would have gotten naturally when leveling up, but it seems there is still no way for the game to automatically bestow those things to you, so remember to go to your trainer when the update hits and double check that you have everything and are not missing the new tools that you have in your arsenal. Moving on to the changes to skills and traits, some of which were teased the last beta. We have first, for blue restorative shield work, this skill no longer requires advanced technique when used. Its potency will be equivalent to what was formerly achieved by using the skill with max advanced technique. When used, this skill gives 5 chargers. While you have at least 1 tier remaining, you will gain plus 50% partial block chance and plus 25% partial block mitigation. Each time you're hit up to once per second, 1 tier will be removed, healing you for 10% of your morale. So, here we can take a look at restorative shield work, and this effect lasts for 10 seconds or until you heal 5 times, which I think it's pretty safe to say it's gonna happen. So once again, on any hit or partial hit, plus 10% maximum morale up to 5 times, plus your defensive bonuses at 10-second duration and a 90-second cooldown, which once again is not affected by your advanced techniques. So now this can be a regular part of your rotation and you don't have to worry about your other skills. The next change that we have in here comes to Desperate Combat. So once again, this is a skill that changes depending on the last Gambit you used. And for Desperate Spear, we still have the strong AoE frontal damage, which applies a short debuff increasing the target's incoming damage. This is a 5% incoming damage effect and its duration stacks, so using Desperate Spear multiple times in a row will increase the duration of the effect considerably. And on Magma Hole also explain with great detail how this works on Discord. Basically, you will get your first use of Desperate Spear, it will start ticking, but when you use it again, it will add 10 seconds to the time you have remaining, and that will keep going until you run out of charges for Desperate Spear. So for example, if you use it once, you get 10 seconds of the debuff, and if you use it again 3 seconds later, it'll save 5% duration for 17 seconds. The 7 seconds you had remaining from the first time, plus the 10 seconds from the second use, and so on. So that means it was really hard for me to see how long could we get this debuff to last, because that depends on how fast you can fire all your uses of Desperate Spear, and maybe if there is some server lag or some other kind of delay, that will make a dent in the duration of the effect as well. But from my own testing, you can take this effect when you use all the charges in between 24 to 31 seconds. And once again, that depends on how fast you are using it. The next effect that we have in here is Desperate Shield, which once again applies a force taunt in front of you and heals you for each target hit. So the force taunt is the new addition on this round of beta. So once again, here we have the heal that Desperate Shield will provide for every target hit. So this can prove to be a very big hit on front of the forced attack. So this might be a good way of grabbing some ads and still getting your morale up high. And finally, we have Desperate Fist, which now is going to deal a moderate AoE damage and will stun the enemies in front of you up to a maximum of 6 targets. So these are the changes to all versions of Desperate Combat. And now we have Never Surrender, and there are many interesting changes to Never Surrender. Never Surrender is now a limited time skill. Using it will give you the Never Surrender effect you know and love, but with a few changes. The effect only lasts for 20 seconds, its health restoration will only trigger if you fall below 5% morale, and it gives you a short mitigation buff for a period after the heal is triggered. Its base cooldown has been reduced to 5 minutes, and the blue line trait reduces it further 3 minutes to a 2-minute expected cooldown for tanks, meaning you'll be able to use it much more frequently, though not back to back. So here you can see the comparison of Never Surrender when you are traded in red versus when you are traded in blue and have the trade purchased. You will notice that there's still a typo on the trade claiming that it will reduce the cooldown of Never Surrender by 5 minutes, but that is now the base cooldown of the skill, and you can take it down up to 2 minutes when you are traded in your tanking line. So let's see that new Never Surrender in action. Here I am popping the skill, and the skill will pop and will give you this new effect. Having survived a killing blow, your defenses are hardened, but your shield gambit healing is reduced. So there has to be some sort of trade-off for the skill. It will increase your mitigations and it will give you the heal so to get you back on your feet, but it will reduce your shield gambit line healing, and well, you would still have your healers taking care of you, and well, you will receive 50% morale, and I think your healers would be able to give you back some more morale through their heals for the duration of the unbound effect, and in the meantime you will have extra mitigations to compensate for that. You can still use your shield gambit heals, and you can still, I think, do pretty well on your own, even with this effect, but this is done, I believe, to stop red wardens, especially, from being too powerful. And that way, with the shield gambit lining heal penalty, ensures that tanks will be taking the most advantage of this skill, because the tanks will have a dedicated healer protecting their backs. Something that is really interesting about this new Never Surrender is the fact that we have the Flaming Spear animation back. That animation was initially exclusive to the Defiant Challenge Gambit version. When Defiant Challenge was a Gambit, that was the animation that played, and it seems on McMahon has found a way of including it back on the game, and this is something that was requested on Discord. It seems the Warden community is very fond of the Flaming Spear animation, and it's now back with you on Never Surrender, and this also gives the healers a way of knowing the skill has triggered. So that way, when the healers see the Flaming Spear animation, they will know your Never Surrender has been activated and you have a heal penalty, so that they can focus the heals on you and get you back to speed while the debuffs runs away. And on top of that, you have the extra mitigations, so that also gives the healer some leeway in getting back to you and healing you. I think this effect is working up quite nicely, and there are even some extra bonuses down the line, but we'll get to that eventually. Moving on to the red skills, the only change that we have is that Recklessness will no longer consume Advanced Technique, and it will give you a slightly stronger buff than the Zero Advanced Technique version present in Bullroarer 1 and 2. Once again, this is something that was discussed towards the end of Beta 2, having Recklessness separate from Advanced Techniques, but it's great to see that even though that's the case, it's still a slightly stronger version than what we have available before. So you will see now it will give you plus 20% melee and range damage, and a minus 15% block, parry, and evade. And you will remember from betas 1 and 2, the Zero Advanced Technique version would just give you plus 15% melee and range damage. So this is slightly stronger with a 25-second duration on a 90-second cooldown. So it's still a relatively high uptime, especially considering the new bonuses that we'll be discussing further down the road. Now, for yellow skills, we have some changes to the Way of Spear. Once again, the Way of the Spear you get automatically at level 30, but on top of that, the skill now requires at least one advanced technique to be used, and when consuming the maximum of 3, the buffs granted will be 24% initial Gambit damage for the Way of the Spear, 12% Gambit healing for the Way of the Shield, and 6% Gambit damage over time for the Way of the Fist. You can see here the comparison of all versions of Advanced Technique for all these skills, so you get an idea of how the progression goes when you have 1, 2, or 3 ticks of Advanced Technique. And lastly, we have now Rapid Techniques, which is a self-buff skill which gives your Masteries 0 cooldown for 6 seconds and reduces your power costs during that period with a 90-second cooldown. So once again, Rapid Techniques no longer requires any advanced techniques to be used, and the effect has been changed slightly from Beta 1 and 2. So previously, after the 0 cooldown on your Masteries for 6 seconds, it was resetting your cooldowns periodically for another 4 seconds, I believe it was. But now what it's doing is giving you 0 cooldowns on your Masteries for 6 seconds and reducing your power costs during that period. So it's a little more consistent now. I think, don't quote me on that, but for some people it was a little hard to adjust to the constant reset of the master cooldown, and it wasn't too long, to be honest with you, so maybe on Magma Hull, so it wasn't adding that much, and the power costs reduction seems to be a little bit more useful with the new power revamp that we are getting with this update as well. One way or another, this is the new effect that we are getting for rapid techniques. Now, as promised on the last round of beta, there are some traits and trait bonuses that have changed as well, starting with the blue line. The first of all is the trait bonus Elegant Finish, which in this round of Bullroarer was renamed as Proactive Defense, and that basically gives you a defensive buff when you tier up or cash out your advanced techniques. So you will see tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and spending their tier 3. So basically what this means is when you are at 1 advanced techniques and tier up to 2 advanced techniques, you will get minor advanced defense 1, minus 2% incoming damage for 10 seconds. When you go from 2 advanced techniques to 3 advanced techniques, you will get minor advanced defense 2. That will give you minus 4% incoming damage for 10 seconds. When you are at 3 advanced technique and build another stack, well, you will not get advanced techniques 4, but you will get minor advanced defense 3, giving you minus 6% incoming damage for 10 seconds. And when you have a full stack of advanced techniques and cash it out with one of your skills, you will get advanced defense that will give you minus 12% incoming damage for 15 seconds. So once again, this is something that was introduced on beta 2 but has now seen a facelift. On beta 2 you would get the minus 12% incoming damage whether you were cashing out advanced techniques or going over your stacks of advanced techniques, building a top advanced techniques 3. And that would be minus 12% incoming damage if you were on blue line and minus 2% incoming damage if you were on red line. So this bonus has now been moved and is now exclusive to blue line, and depending on how many advanced technique ticks you have, you will get different versions of this bonus. Something that on Magma Hull also mentioned on the last round of beta, he was not so enthusiastic about having the 2 bonuses be the same, but he has found a way of making a difference and giving you still a buff when you are just building your advanced techniques, which will also help as you get ready to cash out your techniques. But the biggest bonus will come, of course, from using your full stack of advanced techniques. Something else that I also like about this update is the fact that these bonuses are not exclusive, so you can build them up on top of each other. Maybe you are not able to build a full stack of advanced techniques in 10 seconds to stack one of these effects on top of the other, but even if you can, you will go from minus 2% incoming damage and then minus 4 and then minus 6, and then you cash out your advanced technique. So basically you get a progressive damage reduction the more advanced techniques you build, and this is, in my opinion, something that also builds a good synergy with the idea that you will be building advanced techniques with your Gambit Chains and hopefully cashing them out when you are at a full stack of 3 advanced techniques. Now you get something extra for building advanced techniques, and that is another addition that I also like. Here we can see a comparison of all the trait bonuses you get from speccing into blue line, and we have a comparison between beta 1 and beta 3. You will see the bonuses remain almost the same. The only difference is that Elegant Finish is now Proactive Defense, and those effects have changed. And on top of that, Proactive Defense has switched places with Close Call. So now you get Proactive Defense as your 5th bonus into the blue line, and you get Close Call as your 3rd bonus, as opposed to what happened on beta 1, but is just a minor change. Nonetheless, it's worth mentioning. And now, as for the traits that you get in the blue line, there have been two changes. First of all, the trait Practiced Openers has become Practiced Fundamentals. And initially, what this did was providing a bonus to your Gambit Chain openers, but since Gambit Chains have changed from Beta 1 to Beta 3, it makes sense for this trait to change as well, and this is what we have now with Practice Fundamentals. What this does now is improve your 2 builder gambits, providing an extra duration on their buffs, extra healing, extra skill damage, and extra damage over time. So since we can now build our Gambit Chains in any order, this trait has changed in order to provide a buff to the 2 builder gambits and make them still worth using, which was one of the goals of Unmac Mahal, providing a situation in which each gambit would be useful, and this is what this trait is aimed to do now. And lastly, on the traits, we have Fellowship Protector. Previously, what this did was providing a mitigation buff every time you use Conviction, and it will provide a mitigation buff on your Fellowship. But now, instead of being a mitigation buff, it's just a plain incoming damage reduction and minus 5% incoming damage when you cash out Advanced Techniques. So now, instead of using Conviction and trying to stack Conviction on top of each other, you just need to cash out Advanced Technique to provide your Fellowship with a minus 5% incoming damage buff. Something really interesting about Fellowship Protector is that these pulse of incoming damage reduction that you provide to your Fellowship mirrors the incoming damage reduction that you get for yourself when you are building and cashing out Advanced Techniques. So I also like this synergy in between these two effects. I think that's a clever way of combining them both. I don't know about Fellowship Protector, if maybe the damage reduction for the Fellowship needs to be higher or if it's working just fine at minus 5%. I have seen some comments going both ways, but well, that's what this round of testing is for. So once again, if you have feedback regarding this change, please be sure to provide it on the forums or on Discord. So these are the changes made on this round of beta for the blue traits, but you will see that other than that, the traits have not changed. They have still the same placement. You will still find the same requirements from one trait to be able to go into the next ones on the line. So the tree remains the same. It's just the effects of Practice Fundamentals and Fellowship Protector that have changed to adjust to the new effects introduced in this round of beta. As for the red line, there are no changes on the trait bonuses and the actual traits on this line. So let's move on to the yellow line. First of all, we have an update to piercing javelins. So now, instead of giving you armor penetration, this trait will reduce the chances of your javelin skills and gambits being blocked, parried, evade, or resisted up to 4% when you are at max rank. But on top of that, the yellow line has also seen some other changes in the way in which this tree is laid out. So you will see, for example, on the first level of the yellow tree, we only have 3 traits now instead of 4. Endurance training has moved to the second line of the tree. And we have also seen Bullseye go up from the third line to the second line of the 3. And we also have Throwing Arm that has gone down to the third line from the second one. These are the changes in the placement of some of these traits. We also have, of course, the removal of the Way of the Spear trait, because now this is a skill granted at level 30. And finally, most of the requirements that used to exist on the yellow line have been removed. So, for example, in order to get Bullseye and the critical chance, you needed to spec first into throwing arm, and that meant you were using some points on traits that were not useful for certain builds. As I said, most of these requirements have been removed, giving you a lot more flexibility in the way in which you trade into yellow, and the only requirement that was kept is Javelin of the Deadly Force being a requirement for Snapshot, which I don't mind that much. I think it's still expected for you to trade Javelin of the Deadly Force to get the AoE effect on marked and diminished targets. If you are already using Javelin of the Deadly Force, chances are you are using your other Javelin skills. So for me, it still makes sense to have Snapshot come after that, so that then your Gambit builders will have a chance of resetting your Javelin cooldowns, which might be useful for Javelin of the Deadly Force, for Ambush and Hampering Javelin, which have some situational uses as well. I personally don't see myself using Snapshot that much, but I do know some players who like to use it, and I think the requirement of Javelin of the Deadly Force is not that far-fetched. Now, back on the general notes for this beta round on Bullroarer, there are also some Warden updates to be found in here. First of all, we have adjusted some skill animations and VFX to improve skill differentiation and parity in skill execution times. So basically, this is aiming at having your skills and gambits be faster and snappier. And there are a couple of examples that I really want to try. Once again, I'm not entirely sure about every single gambit there is, but if we try to look at the worst offenders regarding animation time, we have things like Dance of War, which I think it's right now the longest animation for the Warden. We also have things like Fierce Resolve and Exaltation of Battle, Warcry, maybe Resounding Challenge and Defiant Challenge, but we'll need to see. So back at the training dummy, if we try to do Dance of War, for example, wow, amazing. What about Warcry? Oh my god. Resounding Challenge, it's still the same. Defiant Challenge, yeah, it's still the same as well. Let's try Exaltation of Battle. Oh, Fierce Resolve, yeah. What about Resolution? Yeah, all morale taps have seen their animations reduced. Offensive Strike, not so much. Let me take a look at my gambits in here and see what else we can find. Spear of Virtue. It's another one that I think was quite long, but it doesn't seem to have changed that much. Celebration of Skill is also a little bit faster, so maybe that means Impressive Flourish is faster too. Alright. Maddening Strike, I don't see any difference in there. What about Conviction? Yeah, a little bit. I do notice some difference in there. Something like, for example, Brink of Victory and Shorty of Death. They don't have a lot to work with in here. Desolation. Power Attack. Mighty Blow. Unerring Strike. Wall of Steel is basically the same. Authorize and Steal 2. Unseen Strikes. Spear of Fate. It's also the same. Dark Before Dawn seems a little bit faster as well. Shield Tactics. Shield Mastery is also a little bit faster. Shield Tactics seems so as well. Shield Up. Reddit Blade. All those gambits. Mostly defensive gambits are the ones that have seen a facelift. Impressive Flourish, Dance of War, War Cry, Exaltation of Battle, Fierce Resolve, Resolution, all those share the same animations. Shield Mastery, Shield Tactics, Reddit Blade, and Shield Work all seem also to be going faster, and that is also gonna improve the time the Warden takes to build the buffs, the defensive buffs, and also give you the time to maybe cram in another gambit for utility or whatever you need. That is also gonna be really good. Now, while reviewing the footage, I think all the animations have received a facelift. I could not categorically state that, but from what I've seen, it seems so. The gambit builders feel snappier, the default attack as well, and all the offensive gambits that I initially thought were the same. After reviewing the footage, I'm not so sure. Things like Onslaught and Wall of Steel seem faster when reviewing the footage. Maybe not on the day-to-day gameplay, but I do notice a difference when I can focus on what I'm seeing and not thinking about building my other gambits and rotations and the like. So once again, I could not 100% be sure that every single animation on the Warden has been reworked, but on second thought, it seems more of them have than I initially thought. We have, well, defensive shield work no longer consumes advanced techniques. It now applies what was previously max potency and increases your partial block mitigation by 25%. We had already seen that change. Javelin damage values now correctly match other one-handed weapon values. So that is something that was brought up by Onmac Mahal, the desire to make Javelin, the Javelin damage equal to sword damage and other one-handed weapon damage, so that way the choice between in the fray and assailment is just a matter of whether you want or need to be melee or ranged, and personal preference as well. So you seen there, it's the same damage, and that might be modified by your gear and your traits, for example, but it would be at the same base level for your melee and ranged weapons. We also have in here Javelin legendary items now give incoming healing rating rather than tactical healing rating, something that is also part of the overall revamp coming with the mastery changes. Now the only legendary items that will get tactical healing rating, as discussed on my previous video, will be the legendary items for healers, and as Onmac Mahal said, that would mean that Warden heals would be stronger at the beginning of a level cap and would get weaker as the level cap advances, but this has been compensated with incoming healing rating, meaning that you will not be healed as much at the beginning of the level cap, but you will start seeing more heals at the end of the level cap, especially the heals coming from your fellowship members, and maybe this incoming healing rating is enough to compensate the loss of the tactical healing for your own heals on shield line gambits and conviction. It's really hard to know, I would say, because this change is also coming with all the other mastery changes. but hopefully this new incoming healing rating will be enough to compensate the loss of the tactical healing rating on the Javelins. Gambit Chains and Way of the Spear are now unlocked at level 30. Masteries now earned at level 39. Well, Gambit Chains and Way of the Spear at level 30, that's a repeated note, but all that we have seen already. Damage reduction from proactive defense has been corrected. We have seen that on the trait bonus as well. Damage reduction from Fellowship Protector is now a multiplicative effect, meaning, as we've seen, is minus 5% incoming damage that will be multiplied by all your other damage reduction effects. So now, the Warden version of the Mossward Quest Prologue Chapter 2 Skills of an Adventurer has been updated to reflect changes in skill availability from recent class updates. This quest should be completable by level 2 Wardens once more, and here you can see the current version of this quest on live. So you need to strike the training dummy with quick thrust or quick toss 3 times, then you need to attack with offensive strike, and then you need to attack with one of your Javelin skills that you get by trading into blue, red or yellow, warning shot, shield piercer or improved hampering Javelin. However, it seems on beta 1 this quest was not completable because offensive strike was bestowing at level 3, and this is the reason why offensive strike now bestows at level 2. On top of that, we no longer have shield piercer or improved hampering Javelin, so that part had to be updated as well. There was also a known issue during this round of beta testing only, and that was hampering Javelin was missing from this build, so in order to advance this quest, you could only do warning shot, as I did to get this footage, but this has been fixed already, so when these changes go live, you will need to use either warning shot or hampering Javelin to complete the final stage of this quest. Something that I also forgot to mention on my previous video when discussing the new Gambit effects is how some of these effects change between blue line and red line, and for the most part this refers to the effects on the Impressive Flourish line. You will see that when you are in blue line, you still have your percentage based bonuses for parry, evade and mitigations. So this is still covered in the tooltips of the blue tree, and it's an information that it's readily available, it's not that hard to find, but I still think it's worth mentioning just because I had missed it before. And finally, what is, in my opinion, the most anticipated thing on this round of beta, and that is the updates for Traceries. A few Traceries have had their values adjusted slightly or their passive stat changed. Some Traceries have been made obsolete by the changes above, and a few new ones have been added. No existing Traceries will be removed. Please do not delete your existing Traceries. Obsolete Traceries will automatically change according to the list below. So a droid maneuver damage will now become Spear Fist Gambit damage, ambush critical chance will become ambush run speed bonus, careful step cooldown and stealth level will become never surrender duration and incoming healing, Gambit life tap damage will become Gambit life tap damage and healing, Mark Target double cast will become Mark Target and diminished target potency, Recklessness critical rating will become Recklessness duration, Resolution damage will become Resolution damage and healing, Resolution target resist chance will become Morale tap resistance reduction, Shield piercer duration and evade debuff chance will become Gambit debuff duration, Shield tactics tactical mitigation rating will become Shield tactic immunity duration, Shorty of death damage over time will become Fist shield Gambit damage over time, Wages of fear positional damage will become Fist spear Gambit damage over time, and we have 3 new Traceries: Way of the Spear bonuses, Restorative shield work cooldown, and Shield Gambit buff duration. So with this, you will notice that on one hand, we have basically Traceries for all the damage sources of the Warden. So we have a general Fist Gambit and critical chance Tracery that is also complemented by the new Fist Shield Gambit damage over time and Fist Spear Gambit damage over time. And on the other side of the coin, we have the Spear Gambit damage that is now complemented by Spear Fist Gambit damage and Spear Shield Gambit damage. The only thing that seems to not be covered at the moment is the Blitz from the Power Attack line. So that is the Blitz that you get from Power Attack, Mighty Blow, and Unerring Strike. From what I understand, these Gambits are still affected by the Spear Shield damage tracery, but that it's only for the initial hit, and the Blitz are right now unaffected by any other traceries. But we also have some changes and updates for Warden tanks. Things like the duration of the new Never Surrender and the Restorative Shield Work cooldown, the Shield Gambit buff duration, the Way of the Spear bonuses that seems to be useful for both blue and red Wardens. Same goes with marked and diminished target potency, and of course Recklessness duration that will help red Wardens. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but well, you can see that many of the really not useful traceries have been updated to something more desirable. Let's be honest, who used things like Adroit Maneuver, Ambush Critical Chance, Careful Step cooldown, Wages of Fear positional damage, Shield Piercer duration and evade debuff? I mean, you might be using some of these traceries, but if you were doing so to get the secondary stats, not for the tracery itself. But now, from what I see, it seems Warden now has, if not all, at least 90% of the traceries, I would say off the top of my head, are desirable. And that also allows us to have two different sets of legendary items. Because before this update, in my opinion, there really was not a big point in having a set of legendary items for red and a set of legendary items for blue. At least I didn't. I think that was too inconvenient. And what I did was, on my Javelin, going with the traceries that would benefit both red and blue. You can still do that, especially if you are low on resources. And here you will see what would be my recommendation for a hybrid build. But if you can afford it, I think now we have better ways of differentiating our blue and red builds. And so you can go with both. So I hope you've been saving some of your treasury tokens and ancient scripts, because it seems we have a big update to go through now. So after seeing all these changes on beta 3, you might be asking, how does the Warden fare now in comparison to live and in comparison to the previous beta builds? And I will say, as far as I have seen, it's looking pretty good actually, both red and blue Warden. So as for the DPS side, I did some parses myself, but they were not that good. I was struggling to break the 200k mark, but you gotta keep in mind I was using quest rewards for the most part, and my rotation was really suboptimal. I still haven't decided what to do with battle memory. I still haven't gotten used to cashing out and letting my dot stick before cashing out. I mean, there's still a lot of room for improvement on my part. My parses were just truly average, but the other Wardens that had better gear and that had nailed down a better rotation were parsing around 600k, if I'm not mistaken, around those numbers. So I gotta say, Warden is looking pretty good on that regard, the red Warden. And as for the blue Warden, I also did my own testing. I once again was running with my quest gear, so there was no difference in between my live Wardens and my beta Wardens. And what I did was just simply, once again, seeing how far could I go doing the Hidden Horde on my own at tier 1. Which, once again, it's not representative of a full tanking setup because there are many different things. Soloing is really different than tanking, but that was just to test my survivability. But the idea still stands. You will excuse me for not showing you my footage of me running through Hidden Horde, but that was really long, and I think this video is already long enough as it is, so that's why I'm just telling you what I did inside. And what I will say is that on beta, I was able to finish the first pull of giants in Hidden Horde with really no issue at all. The second pull was way more difficult and I wasn't able to complete it, mostly because the stuns that all the giants apply was really messing me up, and the second pull still has more mobs, so you are receiving a lot more hits. But I was able to try the different cooldowns, the new Never Surrender, restorative shield work, Way of the Shield, the life taps, the self heals, and it looks really good. It is very fun to play and you have a lot of tools at your disposal, and something that maybe is not mentioned enough, but the animation changes make your gameplay feel so much faster and so much snappier that going back to the live Warden right now feels off and feels clumsy. And then, well, I did the test of the Hidden Horde, soloing the Hidden Horde with my live Warden, and I will tell you, the only way in which I was able to survive the first pull of the Hidden Horde was by stacking as many instances of offensive strike as I could, so that the life type could basically take care of it for me, because my self heals were not enough, resolution was not enough. So the only way in which I could do it was by stacking offensive strike, which, I mean, it's what you can do right now, and I'm sure most tank wardens do something of that, but it's not ideal. And you will remember in the Isengard days we could stack many uses of Exaltation of Battle, and that was removed. So while I have not checked if offensive strike stacks in beta, it's going away at some point, and right now you have so many other tools at your disposal on beta that it really, you really don't miss stacking offensive strike. But on live, that was the only way in which I was able to survive the first pull. And on the second pull, I also was able to stand my ground a little bit by stacking offensive strike, but once again, as soon as you get the stun, you go down pretty quickly, and without having as many defensive cooldowns on live as you do on beta, getting stunned is even worse. On top of that, well, as I mentioned before, the animation speed on live feels so slow compared to beta now that it really makes a big difference, in my opinion. And that is something that on Magma Hole has also expressed, that ironically the biggest change might be the change in animation speed, because it improves the gameplay for DPS and tank wardens so much that it really cannot be overstated. But that was just my tanking experience. However, I was able to connect to some live streams during beta, and I've seen one warden tanking Sarkborn tier 5 and the Hidden Horde tier 4, and he was basically not even breaking a sweat. On Sarkborn, for example, they ended up accidentally pulling all the ads before the second boss on the second boss room, partially because some warden skills have the range increased and we are still getting used to that, but all the ads on the room for boss 2 ended up aggroing on the group, and the healer died. A lot of people died, but while the healer retreated and ran back to the room, the warden was able to basically just through self-heals and cooldowns keep himself up at all times. And it was so encouraging seeing that. And the same thing happened on the Hidden Horde tier 4. They did boss 1 and boss 2 only. And this warden tanked boss 2 of the Hidden Horde and he did a pretty good job, I would say. Once again, there were moments in which the healer died and he was able to hold himself just the time needed for the healer to go back up and back to speed. So I would say the tanking Warden is looking really good. Once again, this was on Gin's Discord, and well, I don't feel comfortable showing the footage of it because that is still Gin's server, but hopefully Gin will release a video talking about what he saw regarding the Blue Warden. On my part, I would say it's looking really good, and it seems Wardens will not be shone at when they want to tank high tier content anymore. And that is also really exciting. Now, something else that I haven't mentioned yet and haven't found another place to mention it is the fact that on one hand, there are a couple of Warden debuffs that stacks now, namely suppression and battering strikes stack up to twice. So that is also a little improvement over what we have on live, where stacking Warden debuffs is not possible. So according to On Mahal, suppression and battering strikes stack because the other effects are too powerful to let them stack. But suppression and battering strikes, you can still have 2 Wardens, so that way you don't feel punished if you decide to bring 2 Wardens with you on a group. And something that it's also really important is that any 2 Wardens will do. You don't need to have 1 red and 1 blue Warden for the effects to stack. You can have 2 red Wardens, or you can have 2 blue Wardens, and the effects of suppression and battering strike will stack between them. And on the other hand, something that was also mentioned on Discord is the fact that the damage buff on Warning Shot, it's most likely going away before this goes live. It was not making a huge impact. The enemies were hitting a little bit harder, but really not that much. And that was included to have some cost to you spamming your single target taunt so that you would use it more efficiently. But on one hand, it's making such a low impact, and on the other hand, it has upset so many people that it's really not worth keeping. And according to On Mahal, this will be going away most likely before the update goes live. So there you have it. These are all the additions, changes, and updates to the Warden for update 35 beta 3 on Bullroarer. It seems the LOTRO team is aiming for a release date of March 21st on this update, which is just a couple weeks away. And they still have not decided if they will be able to do a 4th round of beta or if they will be able to stick the landing with the March 21st release date. But one way or the other, this update is really close and it's looking really exciting and really promising. In fact, I will keep playing my Warden while the update drops, of course, but I will be missing so many of these changes that is just getting myself ready while the update drops, completing maybe a couple more deeds, getting some more Virtue XP, seeing if I can get a couple more gear pieces so that when the update drops, I can go straight to what I want to do right away. You know, I have a bias towards Blue Wardens, so I'm really looking forward to getting to tanking once again, and this is the perfect time for doing so, relearning the class with the new mechanics that will be introduced, but also being more survivable and hopefully being able to get into more groups. For the time being, we'll need to wait to see if we get another round of Bullroarer or if we go straight to the release of update 35. But anyway, I will keep you posted on all that happens to the Warden until we get this revamp on live. Until then, my friends, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you are as excited as I am for this, and I will see you on the next one. Until then, stay safe, take care, good luck to you all, and I will see you later.